Well, Natasha, I think this is deep, and this is now a difference in not only policy, but also perception and philosophy of how to behave in the region. Of course, we have heard different statements coming from both sides, from the United States, from Iran. But the same Oman that met with Mr. Rubio and said that they disagree with the booth 2 days ago received Mr. Qalibaf, the Iranian speaker in Oman, and they formed a joint committee that will supposedly draft the mechanism of the toll booth. So each one of these, or not each one, but many of these politicians and capitals are giving different signals, contradictory signals, and we honestly don't know how to who to believe. But what we really know is that the fault line is there. The UAE, Bahrain, and Kuwait are behaving differently compared to Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and Oman.
Right. I mean, you have drawn this clear line: UAE, Kuwait, and Bahrain with America, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and Oman tilting toward Iran. But how do you explain this? How did the Gulf go from relative unity to this kind of fracture? And how much of it is down to this war?
Look, I think Saudi Arabia reversed its earlier policy. Saudi Arabia abandoned one camp. It has always been two camps. Oman has always been closer to Iran than the rest of the GCC members. Qatar has always been the troublemaker in the region, whether close to Iran or Muslim Brotherhood or Turkey. So these two states have always been the outliers in the six-member GCC. What you see happening is that the Saudis are now joining the Qataris instead of staying where they are, next to the UAE, Bahrain, and Kuwait. I think the UAE, Bahrain, and Kuwait, their policy makes sense. If you've been pummeled by Iran, it's not really easy for you to just sit across the room from them and say we're sorry and let's reconstruct a whole new security architecture for the region. What the Saudis are saying doesn't make sense to many people, and especially to these three GCC governments.
You know, Saudi Arabia hosting a Iran for Reconciliation Summit while simultaneously being one of the countries that Iran bombed during the conflict. I mean, how do you even explain, or even begin, to explain that to the Saudi public?
Look, reconciliation between who and whom? The Saudis didn't even expel the Iranian ambassador. They didn't sever ties. I mean, at what point were the Saudis angry at the Iranians throughout the war, even during the days when the Iranians were destroying Saudi oil facilities? They never showed any response compared to the Emiratis, who really severed ties, expelled the ambassador. The Bahrainis don't have ties anyway. And then you have the Kuwaitis, who expelled a few diplomats but didn't really go as far as severing ties. So you could see that even throughout the war, the Saudis had this appeasement kind of policy that was totally different from the other three. So what happens now is that I don't really understand how Saudi Arabia pretends to be talking on behalf of the GCC, including these three countries, when they clearly have almost opposite policies. So whether this will be just a photo op, where, and the Saudis love photo ops and statements, whether this just be a photo op and nothing comes out of it, or it'll be a real thing, I'd say it'll be a photo op kind of activity.
Ultimately, if Riyadh is building its own diplomatic track that is separate from Washington's, is that ultimately going to undermine the U.S.-Iran deal before it's even finalized? Or is this just Saudi Arabia simply protecting itself regardless of what America negotiates?
Look, I think the clearest description is that Saudi Arabia has been irrelevant to many issues in the region. When President Trump announced the Gaza peace plan, we saw him, Turkey, Qatar, Egypt sit at the table. There were no Saudis. They were not part of anything that happened, that unfolded on Gaza. Likewise now, all of the mediation that you saw, the war, the no war, the hawks, the doves, the Saudis are nowhere to be found. So what I think is happening is that the Saudis are not really punching their weight. They're sort of sitting on the sidelines. Whether this is something that they're doing on purpose or whether they don't have the capacity to do anything, I can't really tell. But Saudi Arabia today is very different from the Saudi of 10 years ago. Today is just sitting and watching and issuing statements.
All right. I'd like to thank you so much for joining us, Hussein. Very interesting to hear your take as per usual.
Thank you.